debate. The honourable member for Bonavista, Gander, Grand Falls-Windsor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it is indeed an honour to be standing here once again to talk about certainly something that is certainly a topic of discussion in my riding, which is probably the understatement of the night. Northeastern Newfoundland is predominantly my riding, as well as central Newfoundland, or as the fishermen like to call it, parts of 2J, 3K, 3L. Now, I first would like to commend my colleague from St. John South, Mount Pearl, for bringing this forward. I have the honour of being one of the seconders of this, and it may come as no surprise that I speak in favour of this. Just a few comments about the earlier speaker, and I understand the intentions of wanting to create the right markets and the situations by which that our harvesters can become certainly can get more value from the occupation that they have, and to the point where the value of their occupation is able to be passed on to the next generation. However, I think putting things in the window like a capital gains tax is probably not what you want to rely your entire fisheries policy on, given the fact that the value of that catch has decreased so badly that your capital gains tax is probably worth even less than that 1 cent you got off on your Tim Hortons coffee this morning. Now, I do want to talk about the stock rebuilding, and the reason why I bring that up is because we did a study with the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans, as one of my colleagues here in the House can remember, across the way from British Columbia, the Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of Fisheries. It was November 2005. We did visits to eastern Newfoundland, to Bonavista in my riding as well, and Twillingate. In those areas, what we saw and what we heard were, to me, some surprising testimony about how all the efforts being made to help recover a stock were not showing the results that we wanted. Time and time again, the stock assessments were showing that in the offshore stock, less than 2% of what they were in the 1980s. Now, again, for over some time, over quite a period of time, from the time of the moratorium when the directed fishery was ended on a mass scale, that was July 1992, up until now, we haven't seen that recovery. By his own admission, the member who just spoke about over 800,000 tons of a catch in the late 1960s, and now down to 12, I think that's what he said, 12 tons. So we can talk about markets all you want, but this is a question of stock rebuilding. And this is a question of how we go about doing that. Even the Auditor General a few years ago pointed out that it's been a dismal failure over the years, and therefore we have to look at it. And I'm not specifically blaming any one particular government. I blame them all, as we should blame ourselves as well. However, there is one element that the government needs to look at, and I think has failed somewhat on this scale. The negotiations by which they entered into with NAFO, and for anybody who's watching at home, or in this House, know that NAFO is a North Atlantic Fisheries Organization, the international body that governs the offshore stocks outside of our 200 nautical mile limit. In this particular case, what we've seen is a bandering to the point where there was a trade going on, there was negotiations going on that didn't work out in our favor, only to find this out after the fact. When the House voted to go against these NAFO agreements, the government went ahead, decided to reverse that and go ahead with this agreement, and I think that's a shame with species such as turbot, not just cod, or Greenland halibut, if you want to call it that. But in the meantime, I think that, yes, the offshore portion, the offshore directed fishery from international fisheries, primarily from Western Europe, I won't pick out any of the countries, they know who they are. They have certainly had their time on the open water, and certainly we have seen a lot taken from us in that particular vicinity, certainly not only outside the 200 nautical mile limit, but inside the 200 miles as well. When I look at the state of the fishery now in the Northeast, and again I'll restrict my comments to just the northern cod species, we see a small directed fishery taking place. In excess of 2,000 pounds would be the average. We're looking at a recreational fishery isolated to 4 weeks, 3 in August, 1 in September, near the end of September. And in that right now we're seeing an overabundance of cod. I remember when we did the study and we talked about the fact that you have an offshore stock, you have the inshore stock. And the two stocks in question, despite the science was saying that the offshore stocks were quite low, but in many cases the science was saying the inshore stock was also very low. When in fact, our own fishermen told us that's not necessary, that's not the case. I mean, we have situations now where bycatch of cod on the inshore has become drastic. Believe it or not, to many of these fishermen, the cod has become a nuisance species on the inshore. So when they say enough studies have been done, I don't agree, because in this particular case, why is it that we have a stock that's in danger, it's overfished, but yet on the inshore we have stock in abundance? This past season was a successful season for those who had those small quotas. So these are the questions we need to ask, and we need to ask it each and every time. Because right now, as you know, with elements like climate change, seal populations, we have to take this into account. I mean, the seal population itself has grown exponentially, just in the past 2 or 3 years. Millions upon millions. And to this day, even during the study that we did in November 2005, there wasn't exact science onto how much or even why these seals are eating all the biomass, cod. It's incredible. But we need to look for this. I think that when the government decides that it's going to get to its deficit cutting and to its budget measures, I think doing things like announcing that the science assessments over a 3-year period is a big mistake, a major mistake. Stock assessments are on an annual basis. I would even argue more than that. It should be done twice a year, quite frankly, if not 3 times a year or even more, on a constant basis. The science that we invest here now was bad, as they say. It was bad when to begin with, and they said they were going to fix it. I remember former Minister Loyola Hearn saying much the same. Well, it didn't get much better. As a matter of fact, now we're seeing it's gotten much worse as far as the science investment is concerned. So with that being said, the absence of the FRCC, whose recommendations show up in our report quite extensively, it's quite incredible why they would do this. And I remember being there on the government side, and they being in opposition, telling us about all these changes we need to make. But yet, we fall short of these goals, and now it's going even worse. I like this study. I think we should do this study. The effects of the offshore fishery, the international markets, those people that line up along our 200 nautical miles looking for fish, they're not flying the flag of Canada, certainly. We need to reassess that. We need to reassess the biomass itself across the Northeast. Certainly we can. I mean, this was the king. This was the species. This was the species that sustained a people for hundreds of years. My colleague pointed this out in his speech some time ago, so I won't reiterate it, but coming from where I come from, we all know what it meant to us. Now we find ourselves that the king species would be the snow crab, would be the shrimp as well, and even those right now are not near what cod brought us over the generations. I think he's right in the sense that we have to do this study that's more extensive. The study that we did, though, and as the honourable member pointed out in his speech, he talked about, studies have been done. Not really. The right studies have not been done yet. This takes a vast effort to look at this and how we can rebuild the species, and not just the one species, but ecosystem management itself. I had a fisherman, and he's quoted in here as well in this study, George Feltham from Eastport, Rick Kane in Bonavista North, harvesters, one with a smaller boat, one with a very large vessel, talking about how they would go out and catch snow crab, shrimp in their nets, and finding cod, large cod at that. How is this happening? Why is it that within the inshore regions we're showing all these high numbers of cod, and yet each and every time northern cod gets close to the endangered species list? Do we know? Is this the case? If the fishermen tell me, they say, hey, you know something? I went out yesterday and it took me to catch my quota. It literally took me 3 hours. 3 hours of fishing to catch over a 2,000-pound quota. Now, it's not a big boat either. That's a lot of fish in a very short period of time. So one has to ask, why is this happening in light of the fact the science are telling us you can't have the fishery you used to have, a long way to go? Well, somebody's wrong here. And it's not the fishermen who show me the fish on the wharf. And I thank my colleague from St. John's, South Mount Pearl for bringing this up, and I thank the House for allowing me to speak.